Hey, what's going on, guys? Greg Muslakowicz at Blue 13 Productions. Today I kind of wanted to talk about the business side of being an artist in a band and kind of what that looks like and what that means for everyone involved. Essentially, every band, or let's start with just being a band, because that's kind of my background, is starting in a band and things like that, so I have a little bit more knowledge about that. But essentially, let's say you're a four-piece band and you have a drummer, bass player, guitar player, singer, something like that. Everybody's in the band and everyone's rehearsing and practicing and playing for a while. When you first start out, the business side of things is just not really something you're gonna talk about most likely, especially when you're younger, because it's more exciting to just play the music and get together and see what kind of happens, which is very, very normal. But as you get older, you'll get to a certain point where you kind of start to think about the future a little bit more, not just having fun and creating music in the moment. You start to think about things like, well, I'm spending a lot of time doing this, how much money have I invested doing this? Those things start to, become more of something that you're just aware of what you're doing and things like that. And so as you keep going, everybody in the band, you'll probably have a point where you're like, we need to talk about the business side of this a little bit more and what that kind of looks like. So that could be anything from opening up an LLC and actually having a bank account in the band's name, and how does the money work from things like gigs or merch that you sell, and how does all that get divvied up to each person in the band, or do you keep it all there and that band fund is used for paying for other things, more merchandise or studio time and things like that. So those are really important conversations, and it's pretty difficult to have for young, newer musicians who are starting to get to a point where things are getting a little bit more serious and they want to get this to the next level and the next step. So it's better to have those conversations earlier if you can. It's kind of, you kind of have to feel it out a little bit. Everyone's in a different place in their life and might have a different attitude or expectation of where this is going and where it's at. And different people might have I'm happy where this is where I don't care if this goes on, because I'm going to go on to do something else with my life or career. And somebody else will be like, well, this is all I want to do. I want this to be my career. And so that's a really important conversation, and having that conversation sooner than later is why this is really beneficial, because you might find out that the drummer in the band is actually going to go to college, somewhere far away or whatever, and it's like, oh, well, now we need a new drummer. Or you might find out maybe the bass player's not really that serious about this, doesn't want to invest any money into the band and help the band go further along, and that's okay. But those are things that you have to find out and know before you can actually take those next steps. So just having that business conversation about where are we going with this band and this project, like what are all our goals and dreams and expectations, is extremely important once you get to a certain point with everybody in the band where it's like, okay, we've played some shows, we've rehearsed, we have a set down, we've got some original music, like we've made some progress, and then there comes a time when it's like, okay, like how serious are we? And you got to have that conversation at some point. And once you have that conversation, you can actually that's going to open up the door to way more possibilities. And if there are people who aren't committed to it because just for whatever reason, doesn't even matter what reason it is, they're not into it, that's okay, but that's time for you guys to start looking for people who do want the same things as you. You have to make sure that everyone's goals are aligned and that you all kind of want the same thing. And there's just a point in every musician's life where you have to go through that with the people that you're working with in your band. And once you do that and you do have the right members, then you can kind of start taking the next steps and start pursuing the bigger picture, which is, that's what's really important to people who want their artist, or their artistry and their music and stuff like that to be their career. So that's kind of the first step, is just finding out how committed everybody is and whatnot. After that, the next step would be, okay, so now we're talking about opening a business bank account, who's investing what money and how much money into the band, and the essentials, things like, are we playing shows where we need to bring our own PA? Do we have to buy a PA? Stuff like that. Because everyone should have their own gear and equipment at this point. That's not the issue. It's more about buying things that you need in order to make more money. So Could be AV equipment, a PA if you need to go play gigs that don't have PA systems. It could be we need to start having merch that we can sell. So t-shirts, wristbands, stickers, anything like that, investing into that type of stuff. It could be we want to go record some music and we need to pay for studio time, or we need to pay for a music producer, that type of stuff. Or maybe you like to go on tour and you do these self-promotion tours where you're like, where do you need to go do this? Well, it might be beneficial to look at buying like a van and stuff like that. Those are all serious business conversations that you got to have with the people in the band and figure out how this kind of works financially, because the financial part is, you know, it's kind of make or break for every band and artist there is. It's just how much money can you actually invest in stuff? How much time can you invest in this project? And, you know, there's just, you have to have those conversations and figure out what everyone is kind of willing to do. So along those lines, after you kind of had some of those, because those are kind of immediate financial things you need to figure out. After that though, there's things like splits, percentage points, what percentage of, you know, the song is owned by who in the band and stuff like that. These are a little bit more further down the road conversations and can be trickier depending on how you approach it. The easiest thing to do in a band is just to split everything evenly. You know, that to me helps, you know, that helps just make everything nice and easy. Everyone's getting the same amount. There's no resentment towards each other. If somebody else is getting 50% and one person's getting 10% and this person's getting 5% and stuff like that, even though it might be justifiable, that's the easiest way to avoid all that conflict, internal conflict, and can, you know, the project can go on longer if in those situations, because that can be very challenging for somebody to not be getting a very high percentage, even though, you know, they're showing up for all the rehearsals, they're at all the gigs, you know, they're putting a lot of time in, but maybe they're not writing the lyrics and the melody to the song. So that's where that kind of stuff gets a little tricky, but to me, that's the easiest way to make sure everyone's kind of happy and you can, you know, get through that talk fairly quickly. However, on the other side, if you are an artist who's writing all the music, you know, it can be pretty frustrating to be like, well, I'm doing the heavy lifting. You know, I'm initiating everything. I'm the one who's, not only am I writing the songs and, you know, coming up with the lyrics and the melodies and the chord changes and the arrangements and stuff like that. Everyone else is just filling in on their instrument, which this happens a lot, by the way. It's like, they might also be the person who's like booking gigs, you know, and reaching out to venues and clubs and other bands and trying to put shows together and things like that. And, you know, those people, that can be frustrating to them. So all that to say is, like, you have to have this conversation and kind of see what makes sense for your situation. And it's, you know, it's really important. And, you know, like I said, I was talking about percentage points of songs. Like, there, you have to come up with that agreement for every song, like what makes sense. And because that'll determine how the royalties are paid out to each person in the band. But you also could have this you need to have this conversation about just regular paying gigs and things like that too. You know, if you get paid $1,000 for a gig, how does that get divvied up? If one person did majority of that work, you know, booked a gig and, you know, put all the merch together and, you know, help connect other bands to get on the bill and wrote all the songs, scheduled rehearsals and all that stuff, then, you know, maybe they should make more money, but that's a conversation you kind of have to have. So the business side of things can be very tricky and kind of scary to a certain degree, and it's important to have that conversation and just tackle it head on, because once you do, everyone's going to be on the same page. You're going to know where everyone stands. There's an understanding business wise how all the money works and stuff like that. And when everyone comes to an agreement, you know, you don't have that you know, worrisome feeling that's just kind of sitting there where it's like, well, how much money am I making on this gig, or how's this going to work out, or whatever. You've already talked about it. You've already, you know, documented everything. You've already cleared it all up, and now you can just focus on the music part, which is why you guys all got together in the first place. So just kind of getting going on the business side of things, you know, it's really, really important to have that conversation, get the air cleared, understand how this financially impacts everyone. And, you know, you're going to learn a lot through doing that, and you'll be better off in the long run for doing that as well. So anyways, that's kind of a start into the business side of these things. And how that works, and hopefully that helped you guys out. So anyways, thanks for watching.